Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel again, Mr. Sensible. Well, Mr. Anthony Riley has just released a new video and boy is it a corker. I had to make sure I grabbed it quick because I bet that he removes it from sheer embarrassment. It's okay though, I've got my copy, so until then, let's have a quick look at my wonderful, wonderful patrons. My generous patrons: Bernard Godfrey, Elizabeth Schneider, Frank Kelly, Frederick Sigard, Gary Tompkins, John Calvin Hobbs, Mick Farnham, Mitch Goldstein, Poison Toad, Roy Fraser, Simon D and Steve Pleggy. Thank you so very much. Thanks as ever guys. And now, Mr. Sleeping Warrior, Anthony Riley.
Red alert, red alert, red alert, red alert.
Okay, ready for this.
Okay everybody, today we're going to paint like Bob Ross.
Oh wow! Sleepy, I didn't realise you were an artist. I can't wait.
We're going to start off with my famous density tower, and for this illustration we're going to think that we are the cherry tomato in the middle.
You're a cherry tomato? Okay.
So we are the cherry tomato in the middle. Let's remove all the labels so that we don't have any of the labels, and we're going to give these numbers later. So let's add some artifacts. Now that we've got rid of all of the numbers, let's going to add some elements to the picture. We'll start with some ground.
Hold on, ground isn't an element. Okay.
This is the ground and the cherry tomato is now on the ground. And
oh, I see what you're doing. So you're that little cherry tomato stood on the ground. Brilliant.
We need to give these values some numbers so that we can make sense of these things.
Where did you get those numbers from? 70 for you. Could be 70 kilograms. Oh, I see. Okay. So we're talking about relative numbers. I think I know where this is going.
Not that difficult. We'll call the ground 1000. We'll give the arbitrary value of the human to be about 70. And we'll give all the other layers some numbers. We'll finish up at the top with 1.5 for the ping pong ball. And then we'll change the ping pong ball into a sun, and then all of a sudden it's beginning to look a lot like our world.
Our world? It looks a lot like a fetid pile of steaming dingo's kidneys. So you're saying the sun? Actually, I'm not even sure what you're saying. I'll let you carry on for a while.
Don't you think? So now let's give it some water. We'll give the water the value of 67 because we know that humans can drown in water without the ability to swim. And now I think we'll have some clouds, some stratos and cumulonimbus. So we'll stick in some stratos clouds, they're the lower levels, we'll give them the value of 8.7. And the cumulonimbus clouds will give you the value of 4.2 because they're a little bit higher in the atmosphere.
Okay, I'm definitely right with where you're going with this.
It's beginning to look a lot like a landscape environment now, don't you think? Let's consider the elements that make up the atmosphere. We know that nitrogen and oxygen are the main component elements to the atmosphere. So we'll bear that in mind in the volume, in stakes of the volume, but they're two labels that we're going to use for the layers of the atmosphere. And we also know that all of the gases have got atomic weights. So when we look to what the atomic weights are in the periodic table, we can see that nitrogen and oxygen are both 7 and 8. They're numbered 7 and 8 in the periodic table. And we know that as you go further down the table, they've got different elemental weights.
So does that mean everything is in layers? We'll have lead under zinc and so on. I think this is going wrong, Anthony.
So we know that the environment that we're breathing has these elements to it. So we can stick all these elements in. We'll just label them up as such. And we can see, all of a sudden, it begins to look very explainable.
Hold on. For a start, you've got oxygen higher than nitrogen, and yet it has a higher value. And anyway, are you saying our atmosphere is layers of gas? Different gases, different layers. So if we climbed up a mountain, we suddenly find ourselves trying to breathe something that we can't breathe. Whereas in actual fact, the mix is the same, just less of it, a lower density of it.
Without this so-called downwards acceleration force that's not a force, that everybody wants to be a force but isn't there, and even if it is there, nobody can prove it, but nonetheless we're demanded that we accept that it is.
This is what mixes everything up. This is why it's the sun is what mixes everything up. This is why it's a dynamic system. Look, you have got various densities. We know you're talking about your relative density disequilibrium crap. You've got the sun floating. On what? It's floating on some gas like, I don't know what's going to be, the helium. So, I mean, the sun would have to be less dense than whatever the lightest element is in your tower in order to float. And how would you have eclipses of the sun? That would mean the moon would have to be more dense than the sun, but less dense than some other element that the sun's floating in, so that it could pass underneath to block out the light from the sun.
There. Whatever we live in, we don't need a downwards acceleration force. Everything is relative to us, and this pictorializes for everybody how really straightforward our world really is.
No, it doesn't. If you had, now I'm going to use a thought from a guy who commented on my video. He's got an experiment about lateral density. If you had two of these elements side by side, you could say they're going to suddenly go like that. Why? Why does number 10 decide that it's going to go under number 8 and not on top of it? Why that order? Why does everything stack in that order? Something is making it stack in that order. Something makes number 10 more down than number 8. What could that be, Anthony? Just because number 10 is a bit more dense. But if you had some number 10 and no number 8, why should the number 10 move in any direction at all? This is just crap. Now you've actually formulated your theory in this way with an illustration. You can see what crap it is. The sun is floating on the atmosphere. I think you need a checkup from the neck up.
I hope this makes sense.
You hope it makes sense? I hope you don't get arrested for stupidity. Anthony, when you hinted at the beginning that you were going to be an artist, I didn't realise that you'd been speaking to allegedly Dave. I didn't think it was that sort of artist. Here's a thought experiment. Apply your theory to it and explain this. If we take the Earth, strip off all the oceans and the life within it, then strip off all the plants all over the Earth, the ice at the caps, us, buildings, cars, everything. We'll scrape it back to a naked ball of rock. Then we remove all the atmosphere. So you have this naked ball of rock in a vacuum. And then 10 feet above the surface of this naked ball of rock, you appear. Why would you suddenly move down towards that naked ball of rock? It's not a case of relative density. There's nothing for you to stack. There is just you, the rock, and you suddenly decide to move to it. Why? Anthony, I understand that you recently submitted a scientific paper. I hope that you had attached a copy of your picture, because it would save an awful lot of time when they open the envelope, see the picture, and file it straight away in the bin. I created something a little while ago, and this seems the perfect time to show you. Wow, there is no gravity. Anthony, it is your density. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Just click Mini-Me down in the corner. So Darth, what do you think of Anthony now? Twat. Arr, arr.